I appreciate you making it in here, especially after lunch. So hopefully I can help keep you awake. I'm Lucero. I'm going to present to you on building an intuitive admin and hopefully give you some tools to improve the UX for the administrators or the forgotten end users, which I'll also explain what I mean by that. If that's not the presentation you came to see, then either you're in the wrong room or I am, and I hope it's the first. So, as I said, I'm Lucero. I'm the Director of Engineering and DevOps at Forum One. And we have this logo. Forum One is a mission-driven digital agency partnering with organizations and government agencies helping to achieve their goals by creating impactful digital experiences. We've been doing it for a number of years, and these are just a handful of our clients that we've done work for that we're proud of, helping them to achieve their mission. But to dive into the content and the reason hopefully you're all here, we're going to look at admin UX. But before we define that, or before we start talking all about it, we should probably get on the same page and define what it is. But before we can define admin UX, this special flavor of UX, we should probably define what these two letters actually mean. So UX stands for user experience. Usability.gov has a good definition for it. It's practices for improving the quality of the user's interaction and perceptions of the product and related services. So everything that we build into the user experience, all of their experience with the project or with the interface, that reflects on not just the actual functionality of the application or whatever the interface is to, that reflects on their perception of the whole thing. It can be behind the scenes, it can be the best application that's ever been built, has all the features ever, and could do everything they ever want. But if it looks terrible, then they're not going to be able to use it, and they're not going to have confidence in it. They're going to dread using it. So most commonly this focuses on the end user, which is usually the target audience the site is being built for. But what I'm here to talk about today is we're applying these practices for UX, user experiences, for the other end user, the one that's most commonly forgotten. So the end users are traditionally the target audiences and aren't the only audiences for the site. They're just the ones that marketing wants to focus on most of the time and wants their experience to be great so that it reflects well on the company. But over the lifespan of the site, what group of users is most likely to return the most frequently for each user? What group of users is going to accrue the most time spent on that site specifically over the lifespan of the site? One option, site administrators. Some site visitors may come and go and not have this long interaction with the site. Site administrators, they're in charge of maintaining it. They have to come and see it every day or however frequently it takes. And so they're going to have this long-term experience with the site. Content editors are another option. They have to also maintain the content. They have to curate it and understand the site and work with it. So these are also end users that have this long span of interaction with our site, and we really shouldn't forget them. It's really important that they have a good experience on the site as well, because these are the people most familiar with it, and ideally they don't want to be frustrated every time they use it. So having identified these additional users, what do we mean by admin UX? Admin UX is applying these same principles to the administrators and these content editors, and we streamline these tasks to ease the burden of these users. They have to do all of these same things over and over again. All of the same tasks of, I need to create all of this content, clicking through, doing the same thing over and over again. It can become very tedious even in the best scenario. But if that's not optimized, then it's a painful experience just going through and learning all the gotchas, all the ins and outs for the thing that didn't get fixed, didn't get addressed, and it's inconvenient. But if we streamline those experiences, then we increase the user confidence in our system because we're also increasing their success. More of their interactions with the site end successfully. So they're more confident, and if somebody asks them to change something, they can actually go up and make that change. They're not scared to. And having that confidence improves the perception of the system as a whole. So think of some website that you've used before, maybe have to use on a regular basis, that it just doesn't seem to work the way you expect it to. So, I mean, like, one of my examples I know of is like local utilities. So like, oh, the gas company or the water company, they have just this terrible website that was built in like HTML and tables maybe. And it's like, I really don't want to log into that because it's just, it's not intuitive how to do it. It feels old. So a big part of the experience is just the impression you get from it. Even if it's entirely functional, just that presentation, you feel like it's really old. So you're gonna, like, you don't expect it to work right. So if it never works the way you're expecting, you're bound to think poorly of it no matter how successful it is. But helping the user to succeed and have that confidence in the system, so when they try and do something, they actually get that done. They leave and realize, okay, it's done. I succeeded. They're going to be a lot less hesitant to come back to it again. They're a lot more likely to explore and be more engaged with the system because they actually know how to do it. They believe that, okay, I was able to do that basic thing. Maybe I can do a little bit more with it. And they'll dig in. They have confidence, even excitement, depending on the system, and like being able to go in and make these changes. So all of that was a long-winded way to kind of answer this question of why is admin UX important. So let's take a moment and can people raise their hand if any of these situations are something you've encountered before? So let's say you see a typo on the site and you try to fix it, but it takes you more than 5 minutes to fix just that little typo. Has that ever happened? How about you open an edit form for the first time and just it loads. Maybe it takes a while to load. Maybe you're not sure if it loaded all the way because there's this massive scroll bar. Like these just really long forms that Drupal's known for. So like these are just common bad experiences with Drupal. How about another one? You've seen an issue in the content on a page. You've had these experiences before where it takes you a long time to figure out how to do it. So what do? You pretend you didn't see it. Will anybody admit to that one? Okay, so how about, just for fun, has anybody had their scroll wheel break before you get to the bottom of the Drupal form? I'm still looking for that person, but it's got to happen. Like these forms get long.
Do I get credit if I've contributed to any of those problems?
I think we all have at different phases. So hopefully we can start to, like, that's why I hope you're here. So we can not contribute to that anymore. We can contribute to the solution. So a lot of times the question is, like, I want to improve the admin UX. This is a nice buzzword that everybody's saying over and over again. Maybe I should do that. What does that mean? Nobody wants to assume that their site has this poor experience. But what are some things that you can look at on your site that are going to tell you that your site is a problem? Your site has this poor experience. Have you ever seen any of these in working with your site? Seeing somebody try and use it? Are they confused? Looking through the content on the site or hearing back from the managers of the site. Is content broken? Is there a lack of confidence? So like maybe in the scenario of somebody like that's managing the site, hey, how do I change that? I know we were able to edit it. How do I do that? And then maybe you show them and they're like, oh, I knew that. So like they may have known the answer, but they weren't confident enough with the system to go in and try it. So how about frustrated or dissatisfied editors? Like they're just not happy in working with the system. Every time they try and do something, I wish it could do this. Like it would be really nice if it would do this, because this is hard. It makes no sense why it does it like that. How about you're inundated the whole time with support questions? It's like constant, more of these, like, how do I do this? It didn't do that. It didn't do what I expected it to. And just misunderstandings, like maybe this feature, they're like, I changed this. I thought it would do this on the site, but it didn't. And the explanation is just like, well, actually it changes this over here. That's a bad admin experience. You should not have to explain that every time, because if you have to explain it to one person, either they have to explain it to somebody else, or you have to explain it again when the other person comes in, or when you're long gone. Maybe nobody understands that. Nobody knows. And then you just have this legacy checkbox that nobody knows. It's like, I don't know why, but we have to check that every time we say it. Don't not check it. Like, just... So we've got some issues. Hopefully you haven't gotten this experience where, okay, well, it sounds like my site has this terrible UX, but I know I've been in that position before, and there's something we can do about it, and hopefully I can help you with that today. What do we do to make a great admin UX? There's a lot of initiatives going on, and like we're working on making a great admin UX, but that's a huge undertaking. So in the time I've got today, we're going to rush through, and I'm going to hopefully help you to make a better admin UX. So the idea is that you don't have to rebuild your site. You don't have to leave here with like, man, he had some good ideas. To toot my own horn, like they're great. But like hopefully you can leave with, okay, I see these issues on my site. I didn't even know they were an issue. How do I fix that? There's ideas and ways that you can apply it to your existing site. You leave here today, hopefully you've got the tools and some of the knowledge to be able to identify the issues and actually address them. But how do these issues get there in the first place? How does the admin UX get neglected? So a lot of times, everybody wants to see their homepage. Like the company's building a new site. What's my homepage going to look like? What's everybody going to see? And that's the focus. The concern's not over content. It's not over anything else. Like how are people going to find any of it? I want a pretty site. So a lot of times that focus is just on the presentation of the site, the way it looks. And that entirely ignores information architecture. That's the intuitive way that content should be structured so you can find it. That's out the window because that is second priority if it's that high. So admin ends up as just a byproduct of how do we produce that look and feel. So how do I create content to put into that position that way? And rather than actually looking at what the content is, we're looking at how do I match that design as quickly as I can and move on. And a lot of these cases are the Drupal developers are really familiar with how to build Drupal. They've solved some of these problems before, so they have their solution, which may be good and may not be, but they're familiar with ways to tackle it, and that's the way they're going to do it. It's all assuming their familiarity with that experience and their familiarity with Drupal, so they know where to look for these things. But site builders have very different goals, and so they're trying to match that design. So it's very different from the editor experience that we're trying to focus on now. And site builders and developers often avoid entering content. Why do we avoid entering content? Is it annoying? Is it painful? Like, is it something I really don't want to do? Is it tedious? The people that have to do it are going to feel the same way. So, I mean, like, that's that's just how it happens. What are some of the excuses? How do we get there? And like one of the excuses, by the way, none of these are true. So the admin UX is just less valuable. We have all these features that we want for people to come to the site and be able to use. But it's not worthwhile for us to put money towards the admin UX because that's time on features that nobody's going to see. The people in your company or people managing the site are going to see that, and they're going to see it a lot more than the individual users that are seeing your site coming once and going. So it's important to remember the editors, remember their experience. There's not enough time. The priority is always the end user experience. So this is our must-have feature on the site. Very few projects I've ever seen does a client come up and say, it's got to be really easy to use, because it's never the editor building the site. It's never the editor paying for it. So all of those get pushed to the end, and they always fall off the end of the backlog because there's not enough time. We've got to deliver all these production features, and we ran out of time. Or it's too expensive. Like Drupal's interface is probably the way it is because that's just how it's built and how it should be. If we're going to change it, then we have all the features on the front end to change everything and pay for UX to figure out how visitors should interact with the site. That's expensive. So it's going to be really expensive if we're going to try and customize the back end of the site as well. We can't invest in that. It's too much. Some of the solutions for this, if it's less valuable, that's not the case. So educating stakeholders is the best solution to do this. You want to get rid of that experience, that idea that it's not worthwhile. So you want to teach them some of these UX basics. You want to show them this talk that I'm giving right now so they understand. You probably want to boil it down so that it's more for that audience. But some of the best ways are they can learn some UX principles and kind of sympathize with that problem. So if it's less valuable, then UX decisions help you make these decisions on the fly. So all of the times that we talked about all of the features falling off the back end of the project, there's no reason that making a better admin form has to happen as a second step. If we know how to make this decision process, we can do it while we build it the first time. That means there's not extra cost. We're not having to come back for not enough time. That we're doing it the first time, we're doing it right. And because we're not having to come back and add more time as a separate effort that has to be tracked by the whole team and all of this stuff that goes into any single task, no matter how simple it is, it's all done at one time if we know the concepts to build it and do it the first time. So at that point, it's not too expensive either. So trying to address that, let's dive into some of this content so that we can try and learn how to tackle this. So bear with me, it's a crash course. So some of the common pitfalls that lead to these issues. I already made a joke about the long forms. So we know that one. The organization on forms. It should be intuitive so that you can find the fields that you're going to put in. It makes sense that I should look under that tab with that heading to change the thumbnail or add any of this content. But talking about that tab and that label, clear labeling. Name it something that makes sense. And not just to you as a developer. Like if you have this tab called media, we're familiar with media. We use that on all of our projects. But media isn't the same thing to a client. So maybe their wording is going to be digital assets or like thumbnails or whatever these are. Find out what the client calls them and name it that so that they don't have to translate it before they understand what you're talking about. It's in their language because you're building it for them. Misleading help text. Misleading help text is worse than no help text. So we've seen all of the fields that have no explanation. I don't know what this does. That checkbox that nobody knows why you check it. So there's those. Help text could help solve that. Labeling could help solve that. but there's also misleading help text. So somewhere along the line, somebody took the initiative and it was great. They explained what it did. Somewhere along the line it changed. Maybe that checkbox was reversed. Like everybody's tired of having to click that every time. Most of the time they're not doing it. So the default is that it's checked. But our help text still says, make sure to check this, or because it does this behavior, or something like that. And you're giving them bad advice. You're telling them to do the wrong thing. They don't know what to expect. So you want to have help text, but don't go overboard. If you look at this form, just like we loaded, and it's got like the long form, and there's just so much stuff that it's overwhelming, the same thing happens with all of those fields, or even just if you put help text and there's this huge block of text. When people are looking at the internet, you glaze over when it's just a big block of text. I do, but it's a pretty common thing where it's like, okay, that's a lot. I don't really have time. I'm going to look for a different way to do it. So some guiding principles that we'll walk through for how to address these. We're going to look at hierarchy, consistency, simplicity, intuition, and being helpful. These are all tools that you can use to make them available to the end user to understand the system. First off, we're going to look at hierarchy. And this is the arrangement of all of our form elements and just the interface as a whole. And arranging them relative to each other is the number one piece. So just because a field was added to a content type, the last one, that was the last one that was added, that's not a reason it should be at the bottom of the form. Put it with the other stuff that it's most related to. Group them. So if you have a start date and an end date, those should be right next to each other if they're related to the same thing. Use clear labels so that you can say why they're organized like that. And proximity, put them close to each other so that they understand them. Even if you're grouping things in a box and indicating that, the most relevant things should be the closest to each other. And use containers to visually separate them. So even if this is a similar element to something else, like I have this collection of checkboxes and another collection of checkboxes. If those checkboxes aren't related to each other, put some kind of boundary around it so that it's divided and it makes sense. And use tabs to guide somebody through the form. That's our number one tool for killing that vertical scroll. We're going to be able to have tabs. We're going to organize content within them so that it all makes sense relative to each other. And it's kind of a guided process for being able to complete a form. So one of our first tools that we've got is the field sets and details. So details is the new name for it in Drupal 8. Drupal 7, they're mostly just the field sets. The details are the collapsible version of it. So these let you define groups and relate them logically to each other. And putting them together, following the details that I just provided, the principles I provided, this is how you define your relationships with each other, the proximity to each other, and put groups with them so that visually they're represented next to each other. Naming those groups is really important. So just because these are related to each other, put a label on there and explain why. So here's a thumbnail and here's the SEO image. If they both have to be separate, put them together, put a group on it, and name it thumbnails, or just figure it out for the project and name it something intuitive. One thing that is often overlooked as well is when you're creating these field sets or details, you can also add help text. So if it makes sense that they need more information about what's in this group, put help text with it so that you can explain that. Help text is not limited to just individual fields. Another tool we have are horizontal tabs. These, you'll be shocked because I said horizontal, that they go left to right. Respect the language that you're in. So if it's in English or just any of the left to right languages that you read that way, follow that direction. If you're in a right to left language, follow that direction. Start right and go left. But this is the default process people are going to look at. They're going to look at that first corner. complete things, go to the next one. So that's the default sequence that people are going to follow for completing those tabs. Keep the titles short and avoid too many tabs, because if you have too many tabs or if you have labels that are too long, you have a limited amount of horizontal space, and it's going to wrap, and you don't want that. It looks really bad. It's really unintuitive and jarring, and that's one of the examples of where you're going to lose confidence in the system because it looks broken. Don't let any of your tabs become too tall. One of the important concepts is that tab is, you could think of that almost like a progress bar, like going through the tabs and completing all of your stuff. If everything within that is too tall, you have to scroll down to complete it. Unless they scroll back up, they don't know there's more tabs. And it's easy to forget, especially as a developer, it's really easy to think about okay, well, I'll just put lorem ipsum, check this box, something random, and you're doing it quick, so you're going to the next one. As an editor, it's thoughtful content. You've got to spend time filling in this content. Spend time, figure out what goes in here. By the time they get to the bottom, if they don't scroll up, they don't remember that there were more tabs to complete. So you're going to lose all that information. So try and keep it all limited to one viewport, or within one screen. Also, don't nest tabs. It gets really confusing when you have multiple levels of here's a tab inside it. And make sure you do all three of these tabs inside this tab, and don't forget the next one that has 4 tabs inside it. So it gets really nested, really confusing, and you don't remember where to find it. There was that one checkbox that was in section 3.4.5. It's just really hard. Imagine writing the instructions for that. If you've got to give this long map to get to it, there's a problem. And try and limit your sets of tabs to 1 per page. It gets confusing having one set of tabs and then another set of tabs and another set of tabs. If you tell somebody, okay, imagine trying to help your grandma complete her email and on the phone. So it's all right, go to the tabs and click this one. No, the second set of tabs and click this one. And so it can get really confusing. It's a really identifying feature, so try and respect that. Next, we have this radical new concept of vertical tabs. Much like left to right tabs, these go top to bottom. That's the way people read it, so that's the sequence they're going to go in. And we want to put our content in it, follow most of the same rules. The benefit of vertical tabs over horizontal tabs is if you have more options or longer labels than can fit in the horizontal row. This expands much more easily. And thinking further ahead on that, if this is a set of sets or a set of configuration that's likely to get even more content that has to happen, you're not going to be as tightly bound with how many tabs you can add. You can just add another tab on the bottom of it and keep going. One of the risks on it is that the labels on the left take up that horizontal space. So you have to be mindful of what content, what form elements you're putting inside that tab space so that it's not overflowing too much. And again, if you're not careful, it looks broken. And we've gone down that rabbit hole. The other one that I didn't cover in horizontal tabs, but it's also true for both of these, is skippable content. If you can hide stuff in a tab, something that they need to complete, that the content's going to fail without it, don't hide it in a tab. It needs to be somewhere else on the page where while they're scrolling, they're going to see it. Because somebody in a rush is going to go through and try and fill in all the minimal stuff, not pay attention to other tabs, not find that required field, that one required text field in the third tab over here. If it has to be completed, don't bury it in tabs where they have to search and find it. Here's a few modules to help build that hierarchy. And most of these I try and include the field group I try and include by default so that I can quickly and easily define those groups in the field UI. Paragraphs is most often just a structural thing that's included, but if it goes along with your information architecture, it goes into the right place. And we're going to run out of time, so I'm not going to run through each of these, but these are some good tools to look up, and they'll help you solve this problem. Consistency is another issue. You want to stay consistent across the website. So if you have all of these different content types, but it's the same type of data that they're populating in it, it should be the same experience from from content type to content type. You don't want to have this like autocomplete field on the taxonomy tags on one and this like entity browser on another for just the tags. Like, it should be the same experience so that the user's confident in it. Also, organize your forms the same way. If they're looking for this set of data on one content type, put it in the same place on all the other ones that it appears so they know where to find it. And actually, on the topic of like having those same fields, like organizing them the same way, if it's actually the same field, reuse the same field so that it's consistent. That's going to help you maintain that consistency across all of them. A couple of tools to highlight on this. Like you can look up more on these. These are tools to help you in this regard. But Field Tools is a really good developer tool. You don't want it in production, but when you're building these content types, it lets you copy the field configurations between content types. So say you organize this one form that had all the help text, all the fields and everything that you wanted. I've got to make a really similar content type over here. Copy those fields. It'll have the same configuration. You don't have to have different tabs and try and compare and make sure they're the same. These other ones are different reporting tools that show information in different places, usually in a consolidated view. So you can easily compare between which content types. Okay, is the help text the same here? Is this the same setting? So these are tools to give you kind of that bird's eye view of the system and make sure that they're actually the same. Keeping things simple. If it can be simple, make it simple. So don't make the user work for when they don't need to. Don't make them do all the extra work. Provide default values if that makes sense. So if it's going to be the same value, like 80 to 90% of the time, fill that in. They're going to appreciate it because they'll know, like, okay, this time I've got to change it. But most of the time they can ignore it entirely. That's the kind of thing that you can hide in a tab. If it's got an actual default value, put it there. They can find it when they need it, but don't have to know about it otherwise. So along the same lines with default values, auto-populate fields. You can use different modules so that you can set conditions that put a value in the field automatically. Again, the idea is they don't need to look at it if it's going to be the most common behavior. And some of these modules, you can configure it so it's behaviors within the form. So enable the banner image. If that's unchecked, you don't have to show the banner image field. You can check it and then show the banner image field so that it's actually available for them then. Otherwise, they don't care and they don't need it. And if it doesn't serve a purpose, kill it. That checkbox that nobody knows what it is, that we keep having to, it breaks things if we don't check it. Obviously, that may have had a purpose at some point. If it doesn't anymore, kill it. Get rid of it. Or if you can't get rid of it for architectural reasons, you can hide it. Set the default value, hide it. These are a few more modules that will help you improve that visibility of the interfaces. So just each of these give you different tools for either populating fields or making the behavior of the form more complex so that it doesn't have to show everything. Field permissions is a good call out here where maybe you've got an editorial workflow. So the editor doesn't need to have access to the creation date and the original author or something like that. And the approver needs to be able to change some of these fields. With field permissions, you can actually configure who can see it by role. And that customizes your form, makes it more contextual to each person that's using the site. Talking about making it more contextual to the users, we've got make it intuitive. Don't make someone have to ask questions on it. There are so many experiences across the internet that we're familiar with, and we can reuse those experiences so we can follow along and know naturally how to use the site. Leverage that. That is your best tool. That will save you all the help text you have to write. If this is what they've seen before, use it. And also use language that the user is familiar with. So the person using the site, they might call it they might call it a widget. If that's what they call it, name it a widget. And they're going to know what it is. They don't have to translate it and figure out what we called it. What's the Drupal term for that? What is a node? I don't know what a node is. So, like, use their language. They're building a system for them. Use the most helpful widgets. Like, follow the same interaction patterns that are standard across the internet. And group information together. Follow those principles in the hierarchy section. Organize things where they make sense relative to each other and where you can intuitively go through and find what you're looking for. These are a handful of modules that can be helpful for that. Most of them are just different field interfaces that you can add in and start adding text to it, or start using common interactions that are across the site, across the internet. Or maybe it's a more intuitive one if you need different interactions, like multi-select is a good one, where rather than having to hold shift and select multiple ones, or command, whatever the one is, these are all different widgets that'll help you. Custom add another is a separate call out. Rather than all of the multi-value fields that you scroll down to the bottom, it says add another. Add another what? So maybe if your site has to have nested paragraphs, then you're going to go down to the bottom. It says add another, but the parent paragraph field, this is the last one. So there's another add another under there. What is that? How do you know which one to use? Custom add another lets you configure it per field. What does that say? Custom, it says add another slide, add another hero image. And you can give more context. So even if those images are right next to each other, they make sense. And along those lines, be helpful. All of these tricks are being helpful from your perspective. Make the interface helpful as well. You're not going to be hand-holding every person that uses a site, so let the site do it for them. So you want to guide the user through the process. That's similar to the tab solution we talked about, where we're following their intuition, going the order that they typically read, so the system's guiding them through the form and letting them complete it naturally. Include your help text. Give some tips and labels about what to expect when they're completing the form, what they should be providing in the form, and just help them out with it. And that's a really good topic to cover as well, is the user should know what to expect. If I click this publish button, or if I click this save button, is it going to be live on the site? Is everybody going to see what I just did? Or is it going to save as a draft? Is it going to have to be reviewed? What's the process there? Add help text so that they don't have to question, what is this going to do? They should know what to expect so they don't have that fear of the unknown, that fear, I don't know what's going to happen. By doing that, you're going to make the user's job easier. And again, here's another list of helpful tools for that. Some of these are in core, so that's not even another thing you have to download. Inline form errors is one of the things I recently found, and I was amazed. It's I wish I'd known about this sooner. It's a core module you enable. Rather than putting all the error messages at the top of the form, it'll actually put them near the field. It'll put it near the label so you can see, okay, that's the issue, and it's that field. I don't have to find the name and look through the form and find it. All of these other ones are just helpful things to, if the user shouldn't have to do it, if it happens the same way every time, if it's something that they need to make sure and remember to do this, be helpful, use these modules, and it'll take care of a lot of things for them. So to wrap up, there's a few different resources I can point you to, because there's so much more on this topic that you can dig into and learn so that you can make these decisions on while you're building these. Or, depending on your role, you can ask for this, or just whatever your interaction is with Drupal. You can recognize a bad interface and get it addressed. So some of the best resources are here. Drupal user interface standards is one that's kind of buried. I have to bookmark it every time I find it, but it's a good resource to look at. It's got most of the pictures for some of the different widgets that I looked at, gives you bullet points on when to use them, how to use them. Usability.gov is a massive resource for just exploring anything UX related. There's the initiative, so like we covered building a better admin UX. That's where you go if you want to look at building a great admin UX. Those are the bigger initiatives that are being worked on to make the experience a lot better in Drupal. So we're not the one that's saying, oh yeah, it's got this really old clunky interface. So let's fix that problem. And there's other distributions aiming, like each of the distributions has their own goals, but a lot of these are aimed towards improving that experience with Drupal all around. So here's a handful of those to look at as well. Thank you. Anybody have any questions?
Can you go back to the slide that had a list of modules? It was your second list, like admin UX modules? It had allowed formats, vertical tabs, config, and then some other things that I didn't write down.
That was for simplify.
Simplify, thank you.
Yay.
Thank you.
Yep.
I think it's table 8.5, but there's the settings tray, sometimes called the off-canvas tray. Have you had any luck making that useful for users in the admin UI? We tried it with paragraphs, and I've seen some examples that were awesome, but they're so heavily customized, and the out-of-the-box performance was really just crap.
Okay, so if I understand, the question is, like, if I've had any success with the off-canvas tray, so using that to expose some of the settings, and like, I love the purpose of it, so that we can make it more contextual. Like, you don't have to go to a different page and find all the settings. I have not gotten to actually use it yet myself, so I can't really speak much to experiences with that, unfortunately.
The inline entity editor, the problem we run into is when you have a lot of nested relationships. So a good example we have is a conference, and then there's a session, and then there's a presentation, and there's a presenter, and then there's an organization, then there's an address, and that's all one like path. Do you have any suggestions for how to make that not so nested, or like deal with that? You had mentioned, I think, to add another module, what's it called, the custom add another. Maybe help with that.
Well, custom add another won't. So the question was using inline entity form with really nested data models. That's definitely a challenge. A lot of times I'll attribute that to, like, you've kind of got an architecture issue, but there are ways to work around it. Some of it you can break out into sub-entity types. You can create different, like you can break it out into a different entity that's going to be placed in that form, and maybe let them edit through a modal to create that. Another common solution is, like, for that same kind of model where you're breaking out the data into its own thing, using Entity Browser, so that you provide an intuitive way for them to, like, open up a modal and go and find the content that they're looking for. The autocomplete serves the same purpose of letting you find and reference existing content, but how many sites have you worked with that have, like, 3 nodes named the same thing, or just like something like autocomplete doesn't get you far enough. Like, Entity Browser lets you pull up a different screen, a modal or iframe, and actually configure a view so they can filter it. So I don't have a good answer for.
I think the idea of modal is an improvement because it's less lengthy.
So there, depending on the structure as well, there's if it's paragraphs that are nested, you can use different widget configurations for it, so that it collapses. Like, if you're editing in this item, it collapses all the other ones. So it makes kind of an accordion menu behavior, so you can focus on one at a time. That makes it more intuitive, so you're not getting lost on which one you're editing or what the order is.
I really liked your examples of using language that is specific to the customer, naming things what they call them. I will say that when you're building a product that's where the platform is the same and you're sharing it across multiple customers, and then you start calling things different names, it does add some cognitive overhead when you're testing or trying to debug something, and can also impact your ability to run automated tests, specifically if you're looking for labels of a certain thing. So it's an awesome idea. There are some downsides that you have to plan for very carefully, especially around automated testing.
Definitely. So just to recap a little bit of that for the recording, there were some. You highlighted the concern about customizing labels per customer, but specifically on a platform where those labels are going to be customized. Like different people on the platform might need different labels. That's definitely that's a more unique scenario. I haven't personally run into that, but I definitely see that edge case where it'd be an issue. And you make a good point about the concerns with automated testing, trying to test features across different variations of it and knowing what label to test.
I would say that's where customized help text, like very direct help text, comes into play. We don't necessarily need to be customizing our labels to our clients' verbiage, but I think using some very clear help text in language they understand, because you're not going to be using help text in automated testing.
True.
All right, that's a very good point. Help text would be a good solution for that. Thank you. Anybody else?
Oh, sorry. You mentioned the admin UI JavaScript initiative. I just mentioned this with Seattle. Is the outcome of that a new admin theme, or is it something else?
I haven't been able to follow it as actively as I would like to. The last time I dropped in on it, I believe they were working on a React-based JavaScript interface for the edit form, so it's going to be like a lot more responsive, a lot more up to date. I don't believe it's targeting a whole admin theme. There is a admin theme being designed. There are links coming off of that as well for a new admin theme. I think I could be wrong, but I think those are being tackled separately. Maybe under the same initiative, but I think they're being tackled separately. Anybody else?
I was just wondering if you were going to make your slides available anywhere.
I would.
Thank you.
Ideally, they'll be. I'm hoping that I can attach them to the page for the camp. Otherwise, I will tweet them at the camp, I guess, and you'll see. Huh?
Included the Slack as well.
Sure.
You can post it to Slack.
I can what?
You can post it to Slack.
Okay.
There's an Asheville workspace.
Or if you weren't on Slack, send it to me on.
Okay. I will work with somebody and make them available. For this recording from past me to present you watching it now, hopefully it's made it to you. Anybody else?